We continue with our reading of The Singer of 6,000 Songs. Chapter 10, The Narrow Gate. You're leaving God out of your life. Those words from Samuel had gone straight to Charles's heart, causing him pain that was almost physical in its intensity. When he had recovered a little from the anguish, he set himself down soberly to consider the accusation. Was he, in fact, only paying lip service to the Lord? He said his prayers night and morning. He attended both matins and evensong in the university church, and very few of the other students could say the same thing or boast of such loyalty. Charles flushed. Had he, recently captain of Westminster School, actually sunk so low that he had to compare himself to other students to justify his actions? More to the point, would he have been elected captain of Westminster at all if he had acted as irresponsibly there as he had at Oxford? Quite overcome by the question, Charles sank to his knees. He remembered how often his mother had said, "When you're in trouble, ask the Lord for help." Now, for the first time since he had come to Oxford, words of pleading tumbled from his lips. "Visit this soul of mine, pierce the gloom of my grief," he cried. Afterward, he felt so much better that he rushed for pen and ink to write down the words that had burst from his heart. Maybe someday they will help others, Charles said to himself, excited at the renewal of his feeling that rereading the words inspired. Maybe this is the kind of verse I was meant to write. In his extremity of emotion, Charles rushed down the stairs, knowing only that he wanted to see John. He ran through the streets of Oxford, oblivious to the calls of friends. His heart pounded as he beat on John's door. Brother John, let me in," he cried. He heard slow footsteps approaching the door. Soon it swung back, and John stood there, looking dazedly at him. "Were you asleep?" asked Charles. He waved his new verse in the air. "No matter. You'll wake up and shout when you hear this, Brother John. Listen." Before he could start to read, though, John spoke up. "Our father is ill, Brother Charles. I'm leaving by the next coach for Epworth. I shall preach in Father's place until he's well again." The light of excitement died from Charles's eyes. "You?" he asked numbly. "I am an ordained minister, Brother Charles. Had you forgotten?" Charles had. But that wasn't of any importance now. "How ill is Father? Should I go with you?" "No," said John. "The best thing you can do for him, for the family, is to stay here and attend faithfully to your own business." "Which is to apply myself diligently to my studies," said Charles. "Well, you may assure Father that I will do just that." "He does not know that you have ever failed to do so," said John, "and he won't hear it from me. Now, I really must go, Brother Charles. Will you walk with me to the coaching inn? Perhaps on the way you can tell me what you came to say." Charles looked at the paper he had waved so proudly a few minutes ago. It was crumpled now, for his hand had clenched it when he heard John's sad news. "It's of no importance now, Brother John," he said. But he smoothed the paper and folded it. "Shall we get started?" He picked up a pile of books John had prepared to take with him, and, when John wasn't looking, slipped the page inside one of them. Perhaps, he thought, when John finds it, he'll know he need not completely despair of me. Charles saw John safely inside the coach. His brother had had to wrestle with his conscience, Charles was sure, to justify traveling in velvet luxury. No doubt he had felt it would not do to arrive in Epworth atop the coach, not when he must preserve a dignified appearance to reassure the people of his father's parish that he was equal to the job. "Goodbye, Brother John," Charles said, when the coachman took his place and picked up the reins. "Tell our mother my heart goes out to her." "Pray for our father, Brother Charles," John said. "Stand back!" cried the coachman. Charles closed the coach door with a snap, noticing that the leather was rubbed and worn for many years of service. He watched the four-horse team as it trotted down the high street and turned north on Cornmarket. Then, instead of following it, he turned down Alfred Street to where the Blue Boar Street and Bear Lane met. At the Blue Boar Inn, he was hailed by a group of merry friends. "Well met," one of them cried. "Sit down, friend Charles. We're planning a rousing night, and you and your flute are just what we need to cap it." "Yes," cried another, "your flute and your ballad-singing voice will be the crowning touch, Charles Wesley." "Hear, hear," cried the other young men, clinking their mugs together. "Hear, hear." A young servant girl, neat in a mob cap and apron, was standing at Charles's side. She bobbed a curtsy and said, "What will you have, sir?" Charles's blue eyes looked at her blankly for a moment. Then, realizing he was hungry, he said, "2 mutton chops and some greens, Molly, if you please." He sat down at the table where his friends made room for him. The air was thick with smoke, and the smell of people too closely packed together. After his brisk walk in the fresh air, Charles found this unpleasant. He thought of John, rolling away north toward Banbury, now across the open fields, and his breathing became labored. "What's amiss, Charles?" asked the young man seated next to him. "With me, nothing," Charles answered, though through scarcely open lips. "But I've just learned that my father is very ill, and I'm somewhat depressed in spirit." The friend nodded. "I'll make your excuses," he said, "and keep the lads from bothering you." When his food came, Charles ate quickly. Then he arose and said a general goodbye. A clamor at once broke from his friends, but the young man who had been sitting next to Charles said, "Let him go." In their surprise, they were silenced. Charles walked away from the Blue Boar and down St. Aldate's to his college. He went at once to the library there and stayed until far into the night. Charles had thought it would be a relief to be rid of the presence of John at Oxford. Oddly enough, though, as soon as he fully realized that John was nowhere around to hear and disapprove of his actions, he missed his brother. He began to look at the parties and noisy talk sessions with the sort of aloofness John must have had toward them. The minute he could do that, he realized how very unworthy that sort of pastime was, after all. He did not stop these diversions all at once. But on the way home from a musicale one night, something John had said recurred to him. "Narrow is the gate, and hard the way that leads to life." Charles puzzled over that quotation, knowing it was only half the story, yet unable to think of the other part. As soon as he was back in his rooms once more, he took up the Bible he had neglected so long. When he felt the familiar leather binding and saw the worn purple ribbon place mark, he felt a curious warmth all through his body. "Narrow is the gate," he said aloud. The words would be found in one of the Gospels. Of that he was sure. But he could not remember which. He carried his candle over to the table beside the fireside chair. Sitting down, he began to leaf through the New Testament, starting with the book of Matthew. Familiar words stared up at him, the Beatitudes, the Lord's Prayer, and suddenly he knew just where he would find the words he was seeking, and indeed what the words that followed were. Eagerly, he turned to Matthew 7:13, and his pointing finger followed the lines, "Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few." Not long after that moment of rediscovery of the Bible, Charles found himself writing a letter to John, such as he had never expected to write. In it, he said how much he missed John and how sorry he was for anything he had done or said that hurt. "There is no one person I would so willingly have to be the instrument of good to me as you. It is through your means I firmly believe that God will accomplish what he hath begun in me." He went on to provide practical proof of his willingness to be guided by John, finishing on a wondering note that showed he himself did not quite know why he had had a change of heart. "It is owing in great measure to somebody's prayers that I am come to think as I do, for I cannot tell myself how or when I first awoke out of my lethargy, only that it was not long after you went away." John, of course, replied to his brother. The variety of religion John practiced was largely a matter for himself alone. Therefore, his directions to Charles were for the same type of lonely observance. Apply yourself diligently to all tasks. Adopt a plan of self-examination. Pray with fervor. Charles, as eager now to heed his brother's suggestions as he formerly was to reject them, tried to do as John said. He and John were temperamentally different, very different. And Charles found that he could not solve his problems alone or in silence. Therefore, he began to look around for other young men who seemed to think as he now did. As he had been able to find a group to follow him in frivolity, so now he easily found a group willing to be serious with him. Before long, Charles was once again the talk of Oxford, this time as the leader of a band of Methodists.